Hello there. Today we will travel to a galaxy far, far away. If these videos help you, please consider to subscribe and click the like button. But for now, let's set in for a smooth journey and a tale of shadows of the ancients, that of a Jedi. Chapter 1. The Call to Adventure. The dawn light spilled softly across the spires of the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the ancient stones. Inside, the air was cool and still, echoing with the quiet footsteps of robed figures who moved with purposeful calm. Among them was Era Sylar, a young Jedi Knight whose bright eyes and firm stride betrayed her eagerness. As Era entered the council chamber, the towering windows framed the sprawling cityscape beyond, where airspeeders and skytaxis flitted between the buildings like swarming insects. The council members, venerable figures cloaked in the serene authority of the Force, sat in a semicircle, their faces bathed in the morning light. "Knight Sylar," said Master Von, his voice both welcoming and grave. "Thank you for responding swiftly." Era bowed, her robes swishing softly. "I am here to serve, masters. What is the will of the council?" Master Reyna, a Twi'lek whose blue skin shimmered subtly under the chamber's lights, leaned forward. "We have received troubling reports from the Outer Rim. A planet named Varyk has uncovered something ancient, an artifact of the Sith, we believe." Era's pulse quickened at the mention of the Sith. "An artifact? Do we know its nature?" "It is a temple," interjected Master Tolan, his deep voice resonant and somber. "Hidden until recent seismic activities revealed its structure. We fear what might lie within." "We need someone with your unique talents for history and the Force, Era," Master Von continued. "Your mission is to assess the threat and secure the temple." Understanding the weight of her task, Era nodded. "I will prepare immediately." Before she could leave, Master Reyna added, "Be mindful, Era. The dark side is adept at deception. You must not let it cloud your judgment." "I understand, Master Reyna," Era replied, feeling the weight of her responsibility. As Era left the council chamber, she felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. She headed to the archives, where ancient texts and digital scrolls filled the vast, silent halls. Here, she met with Archivist Jordo, a diminutive Celestin who peered up at her through large, glassy eyes. "Ah, Knight Sylar, here for information on Varyk, are you?" Jordo's voice was a cheerful chirp in the quiet. "Yes, anything on its history, and especially on any Sith presence," Era responded, her voice echoing slightly off the high, vaulted ceilings. Jordo scurried to a terminal, his fingers flying over the keys. "Here we are. Varyk, largely unremarkable in galactic history, though it appears there have been whispers of dark legends among the local populace." "Legends?"
Era Lindin, intrigued.
"Yes, tales of an ancient evil sealed away, forgotten by time. Nothing concrete, but these stories often have a kernel of truth," Jordo explained, pushing his spectacles up his nose. Armed with this knowledge and a digital datapad filled with research, Era returned to her quarters to prepare for departure. She packed her lightsaber, several utilitarian garments suited for exploration, and her communicator. Finally, she checked the condition of her droid, T-8LN, who beeped happily upon activation. "Ready for another adventure, T-8?" Era asked, patting the droid's dome. T-8LN whistled affirmatively, his panels lighting up in sequence. Together, they walked to the hangar, where her ship, the Star Seeker, was docked. The sleek vessel was small but equipped for long journeys. As the hangar doors opened to the vastness of space beyond, Era felt a stirring of excitement. She was on the edge of the unknown, and the stars called to her. Taking her seat in the cockpit, Era fired up the engines. "Set course for Varyk," she instructed T-8LN, who beeped in acknowledgement and began the navigation sequences. As the Star Seeker lifted off and streaked into the cosmos, Era settled back, her thoughts a whirl of anticipation and fear. What would she find in the depths of a Sith temple? And more importantly, would she be ready to face it? Chapter 2: Arrival and Conflict. The Star Seeker emerged from hyperspace with a shudder, the stars stretching back into pinpoints as the planet Varyk loomed large and rugged in the viewport. Varyk was a world of vast deserts and rocky plateaus, its colors a tapestry of dusty browns and deep reds, reflecting the turbulent history hidden beneath its surface. As Era guided the ship toward the planet's surface, she scanned the landscape for the appropriate landing coordinates. The atmosphere buzzed with a subtle tension, indicative of the planet's current state of unrest. Era's mission felt more real and immediate with each passing moment. Landing in a small, bustling town on the edge of the desert, Era and T-8LN disembarked. The town was a patchwork of old stone and new metal, reflecting a community at a crossroads. Local Varykians moved through the market, their features toughened by the harsh environment, while off-world traders hawked exotic goods with loud banter. Era's Jedi robes drew curious glances. It wasn't long before she was approached by a group of wary local guards. Their leader, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a weathered face, stepped forward. "You're a long way from home, Jedi. What brings you to Varyk?" he asked, eyeing her lightsaber. "I'm here on a peaceful mission," Era replied, her voice calm and clear. "I seek information about an ancient temple recently uncovered in your lands." The guard's eyes narrowed. "That temple is cursed. Bad things have happened since it was opened. Why do you want to go there?" "To understand what has been awakened and, if possible, to prevent any harm it might cause," Era answered honestly. The guard studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I'll take you to the village elder. He can decide what to do with you." The walk to the elder's home gave Era a chance to observe the town. She noticed signs of recent conflict, blaster marks on walls, hastily erected barricades, and a general sense of watchfulness among the people. The elder, an aging Varykian woman with sharp eyes and a firm posture, greeted Era in a room scented with local herbs. Her face was lined with wisdom and the fatigue of leadership. "Jedi Knight," the elder began, her voice rasping but strong. "I am Ryo. You wish to meddle with things that even the bravest here fear. Why should we trust you with our safety?" Era met Ryo's gaze, her resolve firm. "Because I am trained to handle the influence of the dark side, and because my intentions are to protect, not to provoke. I ask for guidance to the temple, and in exchange, I offer my help to your people." Ryo considered this, her eyes flickering to the guard who had brought Era. After a long pause, she replied, "Very well. But know this, Jedi. Many have lost their minds or worse since the temple opened. You must be cautious." "Thank you, Elder Ryo. I will be," Era promised. As Era left Ryo's home, the guard who had escorted her earlier, named Kale, decided to speak. "I don't trust the Jedi or any outsiders," he confessed. "But if you can help stop the nightmares that have plagued us since that place opened, I'll take you there myself." "Thank you, Kale," Era said, grateful for the ally in her uncertain journey. "Your assistance is invaluable." Together, they prepared for the journey across the rugged terrain to the temple. Era spent the night going over her plans, reviewing the ancient texts she brought along, and meditating under the alien stars. She needed all her focus now. The sense of foreboding the temple inspired was palpable, even from a distance. The next morning, as Era and Kale set out on their journey toward the temple, the sun rose over Varyk, casting long shadows and bathing the land in a harsh, revealing light. The path ahead was fraught with unknown dangers, but Era was determined to face whatever lay within the temple's ancient walls. Chapter 3: The Ancient Temple. Era and Kale's journey to the ancient Sith Temple took them through the stark landscapes of Varyk, where towering rock formations and swirling red sand dunes painted a scene of desolate beauty. The air was dry and filled with a faint, ominous hum that seemed to emanate from the ground itself, growing stronger as they approached the temple site. The temple stood secluded in a valley, its dark, weathered stone walls jutting out like jagged teeth against the sky. It was an imposing structure, ancient and foreboding, with an aura of palpable darkness that made even Kale, a seasoned warrior, uneasy. "I've never seen anything like it," Kale muttered, his eyes scanning the horizon warily. Era, however, was drawn to it, her connection to the Force vibrating with a mixture of dread and intrigue. "This place holds many secrets," she said softly, her gaze fixed on the temple's entrance, a gaping maw that seemed to beckon them forward. As they entered the temple, their footsteps echoed off the cold stone walls, each sound a sharp reminder of the silence that enveloped the place. Inside, the air was cool and musty, filled with the scent of decay and old stone. The corridors were lined with intricate carvings and faded murals depicting scenes of Sith rituals and battles, each image a stark portrayal of power and domination. Era paused before a particularly detailed mural, her fingers tracing the lines of a Sith Lord towering over vanquished foes. "Zhar Lestin," she whispered, recognizing the figure from the descriptions in the Jedi archives. "His spirit is what haunts this place." Kale looked uneasy. "And you believe you can confront such a spirit?" "It's not about belief," Era replied, her voice steady. "It's about duty. I must try." Deeper into the temple, they found the central chamber where the dark energy was strongest. In the center of the room stood an ancient altar, upon which lay the device that Era had read about, a dark, crystalline object pulsating with energy. Chapter 3: The Ancient Temple. Era and Kale's journey to the ancient Sith Temple took them through the stark landscapes of Varyk, where towering rock formations and swirling red sand dunes painted a scene of desolate beauty. The air was dry and filled with a faint, ominous hum that seemed to emanate from the ground itself, growing stronger as they approached the temple site. The temple stood secluded in a valley, its dark, weathered stone walls jutting out like jagged teeth against the sky. It was an imposing structure, ancient and foreboding, with an aura of palpable darkness that made even Kale, a seasoned warrior, uneasy. "I've never seen anything like it," Kale muttered, his eyes scanning the horizon warily. Era, however, was drawn to it, her connection to the Force vibrating with a mixture of dread and intrigue. "This place holds many secrets," she said softly, her gaze fixed on the temple's entrance, a gaping maw that seemed to beckon them forward. As they entered the temple, their footsteps echoed off the cold stone walls, each sound a sharp reminder of the silence that enveloped the place. Inside, the air was cool and musty, filled with the scent of decay and old stone. The corridors were lined with intricate carvings and faded murals depicting scenes of Sith rituals and battles, each image a stark portrayal of power and domination. Era paused before a particularly detailed mural, her fingers tracing the lines of a Sith Lord towering over vanquished foes. "Zhar Lestin," she whispered, recognizing the figure from the descriptions in the Jedi archives. "His spirit is what haunts this place." Kale looked uneasy. "And you believe you can confront such a spirit?" "It's not about belief," Era replied, her voice steady. "It's about duty. I must try." Deeper into the temple, they found the central chamber where the dark energy was strongest. In the center of the room stood an ancient altar, upon which lay the device that Era had read about, a dark, crystalline object pulsating with energy. Chapter 4: The Darkening. After their harrowing encounter in the Sith Temple, Era and Kale returned to the village under the cover of night, the weight of their experience hanging heavily between them. The village itself seemed to mirror the growing darkness, with a palpable sense of dread lingering in the air, and the villagers more suspicious and fearful than before. Era spent the night in deep meditation, seeking guidance from the Force. She could feel the dark energy spreading from the temple, seeping into the land and the minds of the people. She knew she had to act quickly. The next morning, Era met with Elder Ryo to discuss her findings. The Elder's home, normally a place of warmth and counsel, felt stifled and tense. "Elder, the spirit of Zhar Lestin has been awakened," Era began, her voice grave. "His power is immense, and if left unchecked, it could overwhelm this planet and beyond." Ryo nodded solemnly, her wise eyes clouded with worry. "We have felt the change, Knight Scylla. Nightmares plague our sleep, and distrust sows conflict among us. What can we do?" "We must unite your people, Elder," Era proposed. "I can teach you, and a select few, how to shield your minds from Lestin's influence. Together, we can strengthen the village against his dark energies." Ryo agreed, and preparations began immediately. Era worked closely with a small group of villagers, teaching them basic meditation techniques and how to erect mental barriers. It was unfamiliar work for the Varykians, but their determination was fueled by the desire to protect their home. Meanwhile, the spectral Sith, sensing the efforts to counteract his influence, intensified his attacks. Shadowy figures began appearing at the edge of the village at night, causing unrest and fear among the inhabitants. Era and Kale patrolled the village boundaries each night, confronting the apparitions with a combination of lightsaber techniques and force energy. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the village, a particularly large group of apparitions appeared. Kale, armed and ready, stood beside Era as they faced the encroaching darkness. "We can't keep doing this every night," Kale said, his voice tense. "We need a more permanent solution." Era nodded, her mind racing. "I agree. We need to confront Zhar Lestin directly, but first, we must ensure the village is safe. We'll continue with the training and then plan our next move." The battle that night was fierce, with Era and Kale fighting side by side against the dark forces. Using her lightsaber, Era dispersed the apparitions with graceful, precise strikes, her connection to the Force guiding her movements. Kale, relying on his combat skills and instincts, managed to hold his own, though the supernatural nature of their foes unnerved him. As the night wore on, the apparitions faded away, leaving behind a heavy silence. Exhausted but resolute, Era and Kale returned to the village center, where the trained villagers were maintaining a vigil. "This is good work," Era said, addressing the group. "Your courage gives this village hope, but we must be prepared for more. I believe I can find a way to end this, but I'll need your trust and bravery a little longer." The villagers, inspired by Era's leadership and their own growing abilities, nodded in agreement, ready to follow her into whatever dangers lay ahead. Over the next few days, Era deepened her training with the villagers, each session strengthening their defenses and building their confidence. She knew that the final confrontation with Zhar Lestin was inevitable, and she needed everyone to be ready. Meanwhile, Kale began organizing the village's physical defenses, planning strategies to protect against both the spectral threats and any physical attacks the Warlord might launch, sensing the village's vulnerability. As they prepared, the bond between Era and the Varykians grew stronger, their united front a beacon of light against the encroaching darkness. But in the back of her mind, Era knew the true battle was yet to come. She needed to confront Zhar Lestin again, and this time, she had to ensure he was defeated for good. Chapter 5: Alliances Forged. In the days following the nocturnal attacks, the village of Varyk slowly transformed under Era's guidance and Kale's leadership. Each morning dawned with a new sense of purpose as villagers, once paralyzed by fear, now participated in their own defense through the training sessions Era conducted. Meanwhile, Kale worked with local leaders to bolster the village's defenses, fortifying positions and organizing watch schedules. One afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows over the training grounds, a convoy of dust-covered vehicles approached the village. The convoy was led by none other than the local warlord, Cadek, whose reputation for ruthlessness was well known even beyond the borders of Varyk. The villagers tensed, fearing an attack. However, Cadek's purpose was not conquest but parley. Stepping out of his lead vehicle, he approached Era and Kale, a wary respect in his demeanor. "Jedi, I've heard of your efforts against the dark spirit plaguing us, he began, his voice gruff. I'm here not as an enemy, but a potential ally. This darkness threatens us all. Era, cautious but open to possibilities, responded, Your change of heart is sudden, Warlord Cadek. What brings you truly to our doorstep? Cadek's gaze shifted across the assembled villagers, their faces marked with newfound resolve. I've lost men to this darkness, and my own sleep is haunted. I can fight you and weaken us both, or I can join you against this greater threat. After a long discussion with the village elders and Kale, Era agreed to Cadek's proposal, under strict conditions. Cadek's men would train under Era's guidance, and their resources would be pooled to safeguard the village and eventually confront Zhar Lestin at the temple. This uneasy alliance brought additional strength and resources to the village's defense. Cadek's soldiers, seasoned warriors, added a new layer of tactical expertise to the existing efforts. Era took advantage of this by intensifying the training sessions, combining her Jedi teachings with practical combat skills. As the days progressed, the combined forces of the villagers, Kale's defenders, and Cadek's warriors became a cohesive unit. Era found herself at the center of this alliance, her leadership both a beacon of hope and a pillar of strength. One evening, as they gathered around a large fire in the village square, Era addressed the assembly. Today, we are not just survivors but defenders. Our unity gives us strength against the darkness. Remember, we fight not only for ourselves, but for the soul of Varyk. The firelight flickered across the faces of humans and aliens alike, casting them in a glow that spoke of determination and unity. The presence of a Jedi, a figure of myth and legend, inspired a fierce pride in their shared cause. However, the alliance also had its challenges. Tensions simmered beneath the surface, as old rivalries and suspicions were not easily forgotten. Era and Kale often found themselves mediating disputes, reminding everyone of the common foe they faced. Meanwhile, Zhar Lestin's attacks grew more desperate and cunning. Shadows prowled the edges of the village at night, and sinister whispers filled the dreams of the sleepers, attempting to sow discord and fear. During one such night, a major attack struck. Dark apparitions, more substantial and coordinated than before, assaulted the village's perimeter. Era, Kale, and Cadek led the defense, their forces moving with precision. The battle was fierce, testing every strategy and bond forged in the preceding days. As dawn broke, the defenders stood victorious, albeit exhausted. The attack had been repelled, but it was clear that Zhar Lestin was probing their defenses, searching for weaknesses. In the aftermath, as they repaired and regrouped, Era knew the final confrontation was drawing near. We must take the battle to him, she declared to Kale and Cadek. We are ready. It's time to plan our assault on the temple. Together, they began to formulate a plan, not just to defend but to eliminate the dark influence of Zhar Lestin once and for all. The stakes were clear, and the path forward was fraught with danger, but with the village united, there was a tangible hope that they could restore peace to Varyk. Chapter 6: The Warlord's Siege. The Alliance had strengthened the village's defenses, and under Era's leadership, the newly unified forces grew more confident and capable. However, the peace was short-lived. Cadek, having integrated his forces with the villagers, received intelligence of an imminent attack, not from the spectral forces of Zhar Lestin, but from a rival warlord, Raylon, who sought to exploit the perceived weakness and distraction of Cadek's troops. With the new threat looming, the Alliance had to quickly adapt to a more complex battlefield. Era and Kale, alongside Cadek, convened a war council in the village hall. Maps were spread across a large table, and representatives from each faction of the Alliance contributed to the strategy. Raylon will not expect us to be this organized, Cadek asserted, pointing to key positions on the map. His knowledge of our unity is underestimated, and that is our advantage. Era nodded, her mind racing with tactics and possibilities. We must use our knowledge of the terrain and our new strength and unity to our advantage. Let's set traps and use guerrilla tactics. will turn what he expects to be a quick conquest into a costly mistake. The preparations went into overdrive. Kale took charge of fortifying the village's perimeter, setting up defensive positions, and overseeing the installation of traps. Meanwhile, Cadek's forces trained with the villagers, sharing skills that would be crucial for the upcoming battle. Era focused on bolstering the morale and mental resilience of the fighters, knowing that the true strength of their defense lay in the unity and spirit of the people. She conducted sessions focusing on mental fortitude, using her knowledge of the Force to teach focus and calm in the face of adversity. As the sun set, painting the sky with streaks of orange and red, the distant rumble of engines announced the arrival of Raylan's forces. The village braced for impact, each individual aware of their role in the upcoming fight. The battle began with the thunder of cannons and the whizzing of blaster fire. Raylan's troops advanced in waves, only to find themselves caught in the meticulously prepared traps. Explosions rocked the outskirts as mines detonated and pitfalls claimed unsuspecting soldiers. From strategic positions, the villagers and Cadek's warriors unleashed a barrage of return fire. Kale led a squad on a flank maneuver, surprising a battalion of Raylan's troops and forcing them into a retreat. Era, with her lightsaber ignited, provided a rallying point for the defenders. Her blade deflected incoming blaster shots, sending them arcing back to their origins. Her presence on the battlefield was both an inspiration and a formidable deterrent against Raylan's aggression. Amidst the chaos, a group of Raylan's elite guards broke through the line, their sights set on taking the village center. Era intercepted them, her movements a blur as she engaged multiple enemies at once. Each strike of her lightsaber was precise, her actions fueled by the Force, protecting the heart of the village. As the battle waged into the night, the tide turned in favor of the defenders. Exhausted and demoralized, Raylan's remaining forces began to falter. Seizing the moment, Cadek led a counterattack that pushed them back, causing a full retreat. As dawn broke, the village emerged victorious but weary. The defenses had held, and Raylan's forces were scattered. The victory was celebrated, but with caution, knowing that the war against Zhar Lestin's spectral forces still loomed ahead. This victory was crucial, Era told the assembly of tired but proud faces. It showed us that together, we are strong. But our fight is not over. We must now focus on the final confrontation with Zhar Lestin. The villagers and their allies nodded in agreement, the recent battle having forged them into even stronger warriors, ready to face the darkness that had started this all. Chapter 7. Unveiling the Past. With the threat of Raylan's forces repelled, the village found a moment of respite. However, Era knew that the true danger still lurked within the depths of the ancient Sith Temple. The brief peace allowed her to delve deeper into the history and mechanics of the dark energy emanating from Zhar Lestin's spectral presence. Era, accompanied by Kale and a few trusted members of their alliance, including Cadek, ventured once again into the temple. Their mission was clear: uncover any additional information about Zhar Lestin's past and his potential weaknesses. The temple, with its foreboding aura now a familiar presence, seemed to whisper secrets hidden in the darkness of its corridors. Inside the temple, they navigated to the central chamber where Era had first encountered Zhar Lestin's spirit. This time, she directed her attention to the intricate carvings on the walls and the scattered artifacts that might hold the key to understanding and ultimately defeating the Sith Lord. As they examined the relics, Era found a series of ancient texts hidden in a concealed compartment within the altar. The texts were written in a forgotten dialect of the Sith language, which Era, with her deep knowledge of ancient languages, began to translate. The texts revealed that Zhar Lestin had been a powerful Sith Lord who thrived on manipulation and fear, drawing strength from the dark energy of the temple. Most importantly, they uncovered a ritual that Zhar Lestin had intended to perform, a ritual that could potentially be reversed to weaken his connection to the physical world. Armed with this new knowledge, Era formulated a plan. If we can interrupt this ritual, or perhaps reverse it, we might be able to sever his tie to the temple and dissipate his energy, she explained to the group. Her voice echoed slightly in the vast, empty chamber, a sound mingled with determination and the gravity of their task. The plan required precise execution. They needed to perform a counter-ritual at the temple's heart during the apex of the planetary alignment, which was mere days away. The alignment would amplify the temple's energies, providing the necessary power to enact their plan, but also strengthening Zhar Lestin. The next few days were spent in preparation. Era taught the counter-ritual to Kale, Cadek, and a select few others who were strong in will, if not in the Force. Together, they practiced the ancient incantations and gathered the required artifacts from around the temple, each item pulsing with dark energy. Meanwhile, the village fortified its defenses, wary of another attack from Zhar Lestin as he undoubtedly sensed their intentions. Night after night, spectral apparitions assaulted the village, each wave stronger and more desperate than the last. As the planetary alignment approached, the atmosphere in the village grew tense with anticipation and fear. The night before the ritual, Era gathered her allies for a final meeting. "Tomorrow, we face our greatest challenge," she said, her gaze meeting each of theirs in the flickering torchlight. "We stand not just for ourselves, but for all who have suffered under the shadow of the Sith. Remember, we hold the power to change the fate of this world. Trust in each other and trust in the Force." The group nodded, their faces set with resolve. They were ready, each understanding the part they had to play in the upcoming confrontation. As dawn broke on the day of the planetary alignment, they set out for the temple, the sky a canvas of deep purples and fiery oranges. The air was charged with energy, the very ground beneath their feet thrumming with the power of the impending celestial event. They reached the temple and prepared the central chamber for the ritual. As they set the artifacts in place, the air grew colder and the darkness seemed to deepen. A low growl echoed through the halls, a clear sign that Zhar Lestin was aware of their presence and their plan. Era stepped into the center of the chamber, her allies forming a protective circle around her. She began the ritual, her voice steady and clear, reciting the ancient words that would either save them all or doom them to darkness. Chapter 8. Gathering the Shadows. As Era began the incantations of the counter-ritual, the air within the temple's central chamber seemed to pulsate with a palpable energy. Each word she spoke resonated through the ancient stones, stirring echoes that had lain dormant for centuries. Around her, Kale, Cadek, and the others stood firm, their faces etched with concentration and resolve, holding the ritual artifact steady as they channeled their collective will into the ceremony. Outside, the planetary alignment reached its zenith, casting a rare celestial light that filtered through the temple's crevices, illuminating the chamber in an eerie glow. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, each moment stretching endlessly as they drew closer to completing the ritual. Suddenly, the chamber shook violently, a deep rumble that threatened to unseat their determination. From the shadows, Zhar Lestin's spectral form emerged, more formidable than ever, his figure swirling with dark mists. "Fools!" he boomed, his voice a cacophony of rage and despair. "You dare to unbind me from my eternal domain?" Era continued her chant, her voice unwavering despite the growing whirlwind of dark energy that began to encircle them. "We do not fear you, Zhar Lestin," she called out. "Your reign of terror ends today." Kale and Cadek fought to maintain the perimeter, their efforts focused on repelling the dark tendrils that lashed out from Zhar Lestin's core. The spectral forces that had plagued the village now materialized in full force, attempting to disrupt the ritual. The defenders, rallied by the village's training, stood their ground, their blasters and makeshift weapons a small but fierce line against the encroaching darkness. Meanwhile, in the heart of the chamber, the ritual artifacts began to glow with a pulsating light, each pulse syncing with Era's chants. The air crackled with power, the artifacts linking to form a circle of light around the group. Zhar Lestin, sensing the threat to his existence, intensified his assault, his form expanding, enveloping the ceiling with shadows that dripped like oil. "I will not be undone by mere mortals and their forgotten magic," he roared, unleashing a wave of dark energy. At that critical moment, Era reached the climax of the ritual, her voice echoing a powerful command through the chamber. The artifacts unleashed a torrent of light, which spiraled upwards, colliding with Zhar Lestin's dark energy. A blinding explosion rocked the temple, the force of the impact throwing everyone to the ground. As the light subsided, the chamber fell eerily silent. The shadows that had once choked the air were now gone, replaced by a tranquil stillness. At the center, where Zhar Lestin had once raged, there was nothing but empty space. Slowly, Era rose to her feet, her body weary but her eyes bright with triumph. Kale and Cadek joined her, their expressions a mixture of awe and relief. The group around them, battered but unbroken, shared a moment of quiet victory. "We did it," Era said softly, her voice carrying a weight of disbelief and pride. "The darkness has been vanquished." The victory was palpable, not just in the chamber but throughout the village. As news of the success spread, a sense of peace descended upon Varyk for the first time in generations. The villagers, once haunted by spectral threats, now walked with a lighter step, their future finally their own. In the days that followed, the village held a celebration unlike any in its history. Songs filled the air, and stories of bravery were shared around blazing fires. Era and her allies were honored not just as warriors, but as saviors who had restored balance to their world. Yet, for Era, the victory was also a moment of reflection. She had faced the darkest parts of the Force and learned much about her own strength and vulnerabilities. The experience had changed her, deepening her connection to the Force and her understanding of its complexities. As the celebrations wound down, Era knew her journey was not yet complete. There were other worlds, other battles against the darkness, and her role as a Jedi Knight called her onward. With a final look at the peaceful village, a testament to their triumph, she prepared to leave Varyk, her spirit enriched, ready to face whatever challenges awaited among the stars. Chapter 9: Echoes of Light. In the aftermath of the great victory, the village of Varyk basked in newfound peace, but the echoes of the battle lingered. Era, reflecting on the events, spent her days walking among the villagers, sharing stories and lessons of the Force. She felt a profound connection to these people who had shown such courage and resilience. One afternoon, while visiting a newly established memorial at the site of their fiercest battle, Era was approached by Ryo, now recognized as the village's steadfast leader. "Knight Scylla," Ryo began, her voice tinged with respect and a hint of sadness, "your wisdom and strength have given us back our future, but the village feels your time with us is nearing its end." Era nodded, feeling the truth in Ryo's words. "I have felt it too," she admitted. "My path seems to be pulling me away, though part of my heart will always remain with Varyk." Ryo smiled warmly. "You will always be a part of our legends, Era, but tell me, where will you go?" "To wherever the Force guides me," Era replied, her gaze drifting to the horizon. "There are other worlds, other people who might need the light I can bring. My journey as a Jedi is far from over." Understanding the transient nature of the Jedi's calling, Ryo nodded. "Then let us give you a proper farewell. Let the people show their gratitude, for they owe you much." The farewell ceremony was a vibrant affair, filled with Varykian music and dance, an expression of the village's rich culture that had survived the darkness. Era was gifted tokens of appreciation, each imbued with heartfelt meanings, from intricately woven fabrics to small, crafted stones bearing the village's symbols. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the gathering, Era addressed the community. "This victory was not mine but ours," she declared. "Remember always the power of unity and the strength each of you holds. Guard this peace bravely, and know that you are never alone in the fight against darkness." The villagers responded with cheers and some with tears, knowing that while the immediate threat was over, the path ahead would still need the courage they had learned to harness. Chapter 9: Echoes of Light. In the aftermath of the great victory, the village of Varyk basked in newfound peace, but the echoes of the battle lingered. Era, reflecting on the events, spent her days walking among the villagers, sharing stories and lessons of the Force. She felt a profound connection to these people who had shown such courage and resilience. One afternoon, while visiting a newly established memorial at the site of their fiercest battle, Era was approached by Ryo, now recognized as the village's steadfast leader. "Knight Scylla," Ryo began, her voice tinged with respect and a hint of sadness. "Your wisdom and strength have given us back our future, but the village feels your time with us is nearing its end." Era nodded, feeling the truth in Ryo's words. "I have felt it too," she admitted. "My path seems to be pulling me away, though part of my heart will always remain with Varyk." Ryo smiled warmly. "You will always be a part of our legends, Era, but tell me, where will you go?" "To wherever the Force guides me," Era replied, her gaze drifting to the horizon. "There are other worlds, other people who might need the light I can bring. My journey as a Jedi is far from over." Understanding the transient nature of the Jedi's calling, Ryo nodded. "Then let us give you a proper farewell. Let the people show their gratitude, for they owe you much." The farewell ceremony was a vibrant affair, filled with Varykian music and dance, an expression of the village's rich culture that had survived the darkness. Era was gifted tokens of appreciation, each imbued with heartfelt meanings, from intricately woven fabrics to small, crafted stones bearing the village's symbols. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the gathering, Era addressed the community. "This victory was not mine but ours," she declared. "Remember always the power of unity and the strength each of you holds. Guard this peace bravely, and know that you are never alone in the fight against darkness." The villagers responded with cheers and some with tears, knowing that while the immediate threat was over, the path ahead would still need the courage they had learned to harness. Era's departure from Varyk was met with mixed emotions, joy for the peace they had achieved, and sorrow at her leaving. She boarded her ship, the Star Seeker, her heart heavy yet hopeful. As the ship ascended, Era took one last look at Varyk, its landscapes now serene and its people safe. She felt a deep satisfaction knowing she had helped restore balance there, but the galaxy was wide, and her sense of duty as a Jedi called her to further adventures. Back in the solitude of space, Era reflected on her experiences. The battles, both physical and spiritual, had taught her new depths of her own strength and the complexities of the Force. These lessons, she knew, would guide her in future challenges. Her communications console beeped with a message from the Jedi Council, requesting her report and her next plans. As she composed her thoughts, Era realized how much she had grown. The young Jedi who had first landed on Varyk was not the same as the one who now journeyed through the stars. With a sense of purpose renewed, Era set her coordinates for Coruscant, ready to share her knowledge and prepare for whatever mission the Council might have next. But as the stars blurred into the streaks of hyperspace, her thoughts lingered on Varyk, a constant reminder of what courage and unity could achieve against the darkest odds. As the Star Seeker sped towards new adventures, Era Sylar, a guardian of peace and justice in the galaxy, was ready to face any darkness, knowing that each victory added light to the universe, a light that the darkness could never extinguish.